Welcome to everyone who is joining this virtual event for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. We know that it is being viewed by people throughout the Midwest and indeed throughout the country. I'm Hal Gershowitz, and my involvement with the museum really began over 30 years ago. It was an honor being asked to be one of the 6 original Chicago co-chairs, bringing this story to the public's attention. I don't know of another example of a community so instantly responding to an appeal as the Chicago community did to this project of immense importance. It was quickly a labor of love, working with just absolutely wonderful people who were survivors, like Ali Wiesel and Benon Vlatkambi, Miles Lerman, and of course, Fritzi Fischal, who by any standard was irreplaceable in telling the story of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and the importance of the lessons of the Holocaust. Fritzi was magic in that respect, and she was so committed to getting this job done. By today, over 47 million people have come to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. One of the things that the museum has done that no other institution could have accomplished is that it made the Holocaust history a current imperative. This was an extraordinarily important commitment of the United States of America that we were not going to forget. I want to thank Meredith and Bill for their role in chairing this year's flagship event for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. One of the questions we all had in those early days was whether or not future generations would share the same passion as the founders had. Meredith and Bill are symbolic of an entire new generation of young leaders who not only recognize the importance of this history, but who are committed to making sure this history is understood by everyone in our country.
Thank you, Hal. Standing on the shoulders of giants like you makes us very proud to be the second generation of our family to support the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum.
The founding generation has ensured that this incredible museum stands as a testament to the commitment that we will never allow the Holocaust to happen again.
Having capable leadership and global reach is more crucial today than at any time in our recent past. An example of this global role is the museum's efforts in convening international partnerships to address the dangerous rewriting of Holocaust history.
We're also living in a world where we have witnessed not only Holocaust distortion, but a rise in violent anti-Semitic acts in the United States and around the world. This institution, this remarkable one-of-a-kind museum, has the reach, the influence, and with our support, the capacity to push back against the onslaught of inaccurate, dangerous information spread over the internet and social media through the power of education. There is still much work to be done to combat hate, anti-Semitism, and violence against Jews and other groups. We want to thank our emerging leaders through our Next Generation Board and our teen committee for shouldering this work and supporting the museum. There is one constant running through our multi-generational commitment to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Her name is Jill Weinberg. Jill is the tireless and inspirational director of the museum's Midwest Regional Office. Meredith and I want to thank Jill and her entire team for everything they have done to make this event a success.
Meredith and Bill, thank you so much for all that you do. We are thrilled to have you as our chairs for this incredibly important event. I want to welcome all our viewers and thank each of you for your critical ongoing support for the museum. It is my honor to present the museum's National Leadership Award to the Gutman family. They exemplify intergenerational commitment to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and are so deserving of this award. Joe and Sheila and their children are carrying forward the legacy of Joe's parents. I was so fortunate to know Joe's mother, Leah, a special woman whose passion for life and the museum was boundless. Leah's story is now properly preserved in the archives of the museum forever. Like Leah, Sheila and Joe have immersed themselves in the museum, providing leadership and giving in so many valuable ways. But their greatest gift is the caring and commitment to Holocaust education and remembrance that they have instilled in their children. Each of their children are now leaders in their own right. Joe and Sheila, Danny and Carly, Brian and Joanna, Michael and Mary, and Angela. It is with great admiration and enormous gratitude that I present to all of you the National Leadership Award on behalf of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum.
Jill, on behalf of Sheila and myself and the family, we just want to make sure we thank you. It's your excitement, your enthusiasm, your energy that really makes a difference. We really appreciate the honor and the recognition for our family. My mom was very much a part of donating to the museum. For her, it was a big part of making sure the story continues to be told.
When I see pictures of my Savta before the war, she was this strong, incredible woman.
It's beautiful to see her in this life that I never knew her in. And at the same time, it's just horrible to imagine how quickly that was all just taken away.
Well, my mother-in-law did tell stories about her life in Germany because we were all curious and anxious to hear. It wasn't as much about her past as it was about the way she chose to live moving forward.
We should take a lesson from what our parents have gone through and maybe take the best out of it and know to make the best out of the future.
One of the things I always loved about the Jewish faith was it was about tikkun olam, it was about healing the world, not just our people. That's the reason we are so strongly involved with the museum and supportive of what's going on, because this is how we can do something that matters.
It's also our responsibility to talk to our families and our children and our grandchildren to include them in the story.
I can't express with words how proud I am of what my parents have built. And what amazes me the most about them is they continue to lead by example. Being a third generation of our family to carry this incredible legacy that my grandmother and grandfather started is truly the most incredible privilege of my life.
You know, as we've gotten older, as we've had kids of our own, the realization that that responsibility now falls on us is becoming more and more immediate.
Like my grandmother and like my father and my mother have instilled in us, you just have to step up to the plate. And so whatever we can do to take on that responsibility, we will do.
The tools that the museum offers us to educate us and prepare us to go out into the world and be impactful in our own way, you know, is what makes this museum so incredibly special and different. And that's why we're as proud as we are to be a part of this.
What you do does matter. If we can all live by that and making a difference every day, then the world will be a better place and the museum's mission will be carried out.
Mom and Dad, my pledge to you is to continue on the legacy and do all that I can to keep moving things forward.
Memory was never meant to be contained in this building. It was meant to be unleashed as a force for change. And in so many ways, this is the very moment we were created for. Thank you for joining us. I'm Sarah Bloomfield, Director of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. In these complicated times, we're all searching for ways to promote the common good and have a sense of optimism about the future. And yet, we face a perfect storm. History education is on the decline as assaults against truth are on the rise. There are more and more incidents of antisemitism and racism, and fewer survivors to remind the world of their dangers. All this is compounded by the impact of social media, which can affirm our common humanity or erode social trust. So how will we meet these daunting challenges? First, we need a greater understanding of the past to help us understand who we are and how we got here. We also need moral anchors to remind us of our potential and inspire us to own responsibility for the future. Education and inspiration, that's exactly what the museum is all about. inspiring people from every walk of life to look back on the Holocaust and ask of themselves, not only what would I have done, but to look ahead and ask, what will I do? As I said, we all want to be optimistic about the future, but that means the museum needs to strengthen its impact as a global digital enterprise, an enterprise that engages educators and empowers students, giving them the knowledge, critical thinking skills, and inspiration to shape that future, a better future for all. Now let's hear from them about the important impact you are making possible.
I've heard keywords and some of the same old stereotypes. Globalists or the bankers are, and then some will say something like, well, you know, the Jews are running the world. These are real stereotypes that people still believe today. I am an African-American woman. I teach Latinx students at a school that's 91% Latinx. I have always been interested in the Holocaust because I think that the lessons should continue to be taught in the school. First of all, I had to give my students the definition of anti-Semitism.
In school, that's when I had learned that there was like an actual word for the meaning of like the hate towards Jewish people.
Their communities may not even have maybe one or two Jewish people, but they're using the language that is pointed toward that community.
There's a lot of hatred in the world towards other religions and towards other people. And it escalates in a heartbeat, especially with like social media nowadays.
When my students come into the classroom and they're saying things that they've seen on YouTube or any social media, they come back and they have all of these statements and they don't know what it means, but it's really anti-Semitism in its most insidious form.
Certain terms I didn't realize were rooted in the Holocaust and hate.
Teaching students about history, teaching students about differences and the world, the universality of everyone being human and wanting to be treated with respect is something that we can learn from the experiences of others. And I think that's what the museum does. They put that into the hands of the teachers to teach it, but also then the students get a chance to use those materials to help themselves to learn more about that time period.
The Holocaust Encyclopedia on the site, different journal entries and memoirs. It really helped me connect, and it's helped me approach it with a more open-minded heart.
The Holocaust Museum is uniquely situated to help many people to understand this is what happened to us, never again. And when they say never again, it's not never again to me, it's never again to all of us. Let's all understand that if one person is marginalized, if one group is hurt, if racism is against one group, it's all of us.
Because of the museum, I got to hear a survivor speak about his childhood, how it changed so fast for someone who was so young.
His tone of the voice, you could hear the fear. There was a point in time where he started getting emotional and he started crying. And when he started crying, you know, the whole class, we were all getting emotional too. I most definitely was very fortunate and very thankful for that moment.
This is one of the 3 notebooks that I used to write my diary, which I donated to the museum. And I was hoping that this could be an educational tool that could help spread the knowledge of the Holocaust.
No mere words can accurately describe the reality of the hardships and horrors. Surely nobody can believe the SS methods if he did not feel them on his own skin. Who can feel with us? Who can understand us?
Teaching in rural Alabama. Most of my students are not exposed to the Jewish culture. Most of them have never met a Jewish person. When I bring in a diary in the classroom, my students are now not only invested in the material from a learning standpoint, but now they're emotionally tied to it. It's no longer I'm learning about the Holocaust, I'm learning about Yitzhak, or I'm learning about the anonymous girl.
She was a young girl who we don't know her exact age or name, but she was living with her family in the Lodz ghetto. And she describes her situation of watching friends and families and neighbors getting deported to concentration camps. And she describes how some days there were hardly enough rations for her and her family. And there was a quote with her that really stuck out to me. She said, "How can you be indifferent to so much suffering?"
For so many students, that is just so crucial in being able to understand a moment and being able to access a moment, particularly if they're coming into this course without any sort of relationship with the history of the Holocaust.
Reading the diaries opened my eyes and probably opened the eyes of my peers to seeing something that was relatable.
There may be a diary in the archives of the museum that has the power to reach a rural student in Mississippi. There may be another diary that has the power to reach an urban student in Pittsburgh.
The museum allows my students to access a wide range of digital collections. They're able to look at diaries, they're able to watch films, they're able to read letters, they look at immigration paperwork, they look at scores and scores of photographs, they listen to music.
For me as a teacher, I'm always looking for opportunities where I can let the history speak for itself. So when a student wants to learn about Kristallnacht, where I can let a survivor tell my students in their own words.
My mother took a dresser and pushed it against the door. And she held me and she said, "Inga, tonight we're gonna die."
Teaching the history of the Holocaust offers me an opportunity to watch change in motion. It allows students really the privilege of delving into notions of humanity and responsibility, of thinking about what does it mean to be a citizen in a society.
I feel it's the most important thing is for me to not be silent and complacent, and for me to move forward thinking, who else can I share this with? How else can I use this to make a bigger and broader impact?
I see that as what I call the ripple effect. That's how we fight anti-Semitism. Hate is by creating those ripples.
A student I had years ago, he used to write swastikas on my desk. He called me the N-word to my face. And when he did that, what I said to him was, "I forgive you." I forgave him not because I'm kind, but because he didn't know any better. And then I taught him.
I truly believe in the power of education. Offering this on a digital platform is a total game changer.
We all have a responsibility to make sure that those tools get out there into the public in the way in which we know they could and should be used.
I can't think of a time in the last 70 years that it's been more important for us to stand up and be leaders and make a difference.
The most important and powerful lesson that anybody, regardless of their background, needs to learn from the Holocaust is that hate, oppression, and violence towards any group of people is unacceptable, and the safety and freedom of any group of people is the responsibility of all groups of people.
Thanks to an incredibly generous donor in our community, any increase in your gift today over last year's gift will not only be matched, but doubled.
This is an extraordinary opportunity to be even more impactful with our giving today.
This amazing match is an opportunity to help the museum unlock these diaries and put them into the hands of young people everywhere.
Please give today.
And please give generously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to make your gift. I was so impressed to learn that the museum recently hosted 2,600 teachers from every part of the country at its virtual teacher conference. It is extraordinary to consider the impact that the museum will have this year on young people across the United States. The institution's educational reach and leadership doesn't stop at home. It extends around the globe. And it could not be more vital as we see a surge in anti-Semitic violence and the vicious vandalism on memory sites throughout Europe.
Shortly, we will hear from our featured guest, Dr. Lambert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer. Dr. Bourla is the son of Greek Holocaust survivors.
Coincident with Dr. Bourla accepting the museum's invitation to speak at this year's virtual event, Meredith and I learned of the work that the museum has undertaken to help lead a transatlantic workshop during the spring of 2021. Educators from Greece, the US, Canada, and Israel emerged with new connections, skills, and resources to develop relevant lessons about the Holocaust. It is now time to welcome our guests, Dr. Bourla and Peter Alexander, the White House correspondent for NBC News, who will lead the conversation with Dr. Bourla. Welcome to you both.
Bill and Meredith, well, thank you both so much. And thank you to Dr. Bourla for being a part of this conversation. 2 Pfizer shots in my arm. So to you, I personally say thanks. And I know everybody watching joins me in that. This is such an important conversation as we speak about the Holocaust, and your personal experiences are so compelling. So let me just begin this by starting at the beginning, which is before the Holocaust. Your parents lived in Thessaloniki, which was sort of viewed as the Jerusalem of the Balkans because of the vibrant Jewish community. What did your folks tell you about their life growing up?
Yeah, they had a very good life growing up. My mother was coming from a very affluent family. My father was the opposite. They were struggling to make a living, but they were happy families, and both of them a lot of kids. My mother was one of 7, and my father was one of 5.
What are your memories of childhood?
I had very nice memories of as a child as well. We were very few Jews remaining at the time in Thessaloniki. So, for example, I was the only Jew in my entire middle and high school for 4 years, and then one of my cousins joined the school because she was living in the area. So we were a small minority. But in general, I had very good memories from my childhood.
So as a child, you learned about your parents' experiences during the Holocaust. How did your father and uncle avoid arrest while the rest of your family was deported?
The family of my father, like all the Jewish families, had to move to a ghetto. They could go in and out from the ghetto as long as they were wearing the star, the David Star. Until one day, which was in March of 1943, when it was the beginning of the implementation of the plan to deport basically all Jews of the city to Auschwitz-Birkenau. So that day, my father and his brother were outside the ghetto when that happened. One of their uncles had asked them to go and collect a debt from someone that he was owe him money. That was pivotal for their survival later. The man that they went to collect the debt, he did pay his debt. So he gave them 30 golden pounds. On their way back, they met their father, who was also outside. And he said, "You should not come in, go." They said, "What about you?" And he said, "What about me? I can't leave," because his wife and 2 other kids, Graciela and David, were home. So he had to go back to be with them. So indeed, he went in, and then hours later, the whole ghetto started marching through the main street until they will arrive to the train station. As they were marching during the street, my father and his brother would be watching and having eye contact and marching on the side of the street. Trying not to be identified as related to them, but trying to catch another image of their beloved. And until they couldn't anymore because they went into the new camp, and that's it. That was the last time that they saw them. On the positive for them, they had the money, so they were able to bribe someone working on a conductor working on the train. They went into the train, and then they went to another city, and then eventually to Athens. They were having fake IDs they had gotten from the head of the police. They lived in hiding, working for the Red Cross, but they survived until the war was ended, and then they came back to Thessaloniki, where they found nothing.
Your father, Moise, you said that he had two dreams for you. One, that you would become a scientist, checked that box. And number two, that you would marry a nice Jewish girl. You said that he lived long enough to see both of those come true. So that's part of your father's story. I want to ask about your mother, Sarah's story as well. It was obviously quite different. Can you describe the risk that a Christian man, her sister's husband, took and how that changed her fate, her experience?
My grandfather had 7 kids. 2 of them were girls. And my mother and the oldest of the kids, a sister. She fell in love while she was very, very young, 17 years old, with a Christian boy. And so she left the family to marry to him. Now, at that time, mixed marriages was almost a crime, clearly not accepted by society. So my grandfather, he wouldn't talk to his daughter. He said, "You're dead to me, I don't want to see you again." But then they moved to the ghetto, and then things became clear at the time that they would be deported to Poland. So my grandfather felt the pressure to reconcile with his daughter, that they hugged and kissed and left the past behind before he went to Auschwitz. And at the end of the meeting, he told her that, look, please take Sarah with you, my mother. She left, and she went to another city than Thessaloniki, where her sister and her husband were living. And over there, nobody knew that she's Jewish, and nobody knew actually that her sister was Jewish, because she had converted, and everybody knew her with her Christian name. And towards 44, I think, a year and a half later, her husband, my Christian uncle, he was transferred to go back to Thessaloniki. My mom, of course, again, she was not allowed to go out, because now the risk of being identified was very high. She was a teenager, so she just couldn't sit indoors. She would here and there go out, and one day she was spotted by someone who knew that she was Jewish, and then she was arrested, brought to a prison over there. My Christian uncle collected everything that they had, basically, and converted it to golden pounds. He paid a bribe to Max Merten. Max Merten was a known war criminal. He was the head of the occupational forces of the Nazis, and he was basically the man who orchestrated all the operation to deport thousands of Jews to Auschwitz. In Thessaloniki, there were 50,000 Jews before the war, and they survived 2,000. That means 96% extermination rate. So he found a way to approach Merten, and while it was extremely risky to offer to a German a bribe to save a Jew, he took the risk, and actually he paid the money. And her sister would go every day outside the prison. Why? Because at noon, typically, they would take some prisoners, they would load them on a truck, and they would go to a place where they would sleep overnight, and then in the dawn they were executed over there. So for her, she could feel comfortable that my mother is still alive for the day, if at noon she wouldn't be among the group that will go. One day she saw her sister, my mom, loaded into a truck. And this is when she realized that that's the end. She's going to be executed despite the fact that they paid the ransom. Because her sister saw that happening, she went back to her husband who called Max Merton. And that was the riskier thing that he did. I paid you the money, you gave me your word, and you're not keeping it. And Merton was not aware. He just didn't pay attention. He took the money, he didn't care less. So he said, let me have a look on that, and he hung up the phone. And nothing else. So it was a sleepless nights for both of them. And the other day, my mother was lined up with everybody in the dawn against the wall and in front of a firing squad. And then a BMW arrived, a motorcycle with 2 soldiers in it, and one of them went out and gave paperwork to the head of the firing squad, and then he removed 2 people from the line, my mother and another one. And they load them to the truck and they send them back. So, and my mother, as she was going out from the scene and the truck was going back to the city, they could hear the machine guns killing all the others.
I just wanted to ask you how both of your parents so narrowly escaped death, losing parents and siblings, and how that has impacted your outlook and really the lessons that they taught you that stuck with you, because they had this tremendous sense of optimism.
If you have lived something like that, you become optimistic in your life. You become that there is nothing, there is not a moment that you can call it that it is done. It is never done. There can always be something that can surprise you in life. There can always be something that you can do about it. That was very impressive, and I think that also made me who I am. They never spoke about revenge. It was always a spin that, guys, there is nothing that you can't do. Life is miraculous. We should celebrate life rather than be consumed in revenge. Never forget, but turn the page and try to make sure that this will not happen again, rather than try to see how you can take revenge. But because revenge won't bring you neither your people back, nor will give you a sensible life, a life worth living.
Absolutely, and how grateful are we for the lives that they led and how they inspired you. I want to ask you, if I can, Doctor, about the intersection of what you do now and their personal experiences. What is your reaction these days to when you see protesters equating COVID vaccine policies with Nazi-era persecution, the misappropriation of Nazi symbols to try to delegitimize the vaccine right now? Given what you know, what do you make witnessing that now?
You know, it's nonsense, and but you know, it's something that I have seen it in the past happening as well. Now is with the anti-vaxxers. In the past were with other things that they would make this parallel. And not only clearly there is no comparison between the two, but in the case of the vaccines, it's completely nonsense. Very unfortunate. And for us that we have emotional connections with what happened in the Holocaust, of course it's an additional, sometimes it's perceived as an insult, because it is. Because those people that are saying these things, they don't know what it was to live there.
Do you worry though that sort of misuse of history does have the potential to stain people's understanding of the seriousness of the Holocaust?
I do not worry. Clearly, in history, there have been many examples that they try to stain and change facts post-mortem. And clearly, Holocaust is one of these. Many have tried to change either what happened or to give it completely different spin. I don't think that those efforts will succeed, but this doesn't mean that we should not make sure that we don't underestimate some of these people, and we stay the course, and we do what, for example, the Holocaust Museum is doing, okay? Writing, displaying history the way it was written.
Dr. Bourla, I want to get a sense of the lessons that you hope we can learn from the experiences we're having today. Among some of the most important lessons of the Holocaust, of course, is to not stand idly by in the face of injustice or unchecked hate, and every individual has the power to act. When the timeline of vaccine development was called into question, you worked with the CEOs of the other pharmaceutical companies as well to issue a joint statement that outlined a united commitment to uphold the integrity of the scientific process as companies work towards the first COVID-19 vaccines. Is that an example of your choice to live some of those lessons?
We saw that there was an attack against FDA, and we felt that we need to make sure that we say that we will not compromise the quality of our studies, and science will be the only guiding principle. I think it is an example of what everybody should be doing, which is to speak up. Clearly, it is connected to the events that we discussed before, because there were a lot of people that remained silent when all these things were happening. They didn't agree necessarily, but also they didn't do anything either to speak up or to their ability to try to prevent it. And so speak up is an important piece of everyone who wants to have a positive impact in this society. Don't forget that the same period of time, we had so much political unrest because of social injustice that particularly in that time was manifested with attacks against African Americans. And then a little bit later, it was with attacks against Asians because of the COVID, but basically because of the fact that people are looking for excuses, evil is looking for excuses, to find a way to play with emotions and recruit people in their evil campaigns. That was the reason why also I decided to speak, or one of the reasons when I was asked to present the story of my parents, because it was times that social injustice was knocking the door of America once more.
I want to ask you, if I can, about a 98-year-old Holocaust survivor who was the first vaccine recipient in Thessaloniki. How did you learn about that fact?
You know, it was something that I was completely surprised when I've heard about it. The head of Medicare of Greece sent me a note. I wanted to let you know that today we administer the first dose, and you need to know that the first dose was given in a Jewish senior house that is operated right now in Thessaloniki by the Jewish community to a 98 years old survivor, and that was of Holocaust, and that was the first dose that we ever gave to Greece. And I thought you need to know about it. So I was really speechless. I found it symbolic. I thought that finally there is kind of recognition of what also happened, because the city also, Thessaloniki, tended to forget the history of what happened during that time.
Why is it so important to you to share your story? And similarly, why is it so important that the U.S. government, in your eyes, established America's Holocaust Memorial? This museum on the National Mall is a memorial, as well as a site of education, a place of learning.
You need to know that I had a very high interest in learning the story of the Holocaust, but I never spoke to anyone about the story of my parents. And when I said to anyone, to my closest friends, very few things. It was not something that I would do. I did it for the first time in a very public forum, which was in an event that Congress had organized. I realized that it is helpful. It is helpful to tell stories that could teach new generations that hatred and racism and it is what stands in the way. It was 3 years ago, I think, that I went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, and one of the big pictures that they had, 3 men, that they are all having their hands like that. I knew all of them. They are from Thessaloniki.
Wow.
I still remember the name of one of them. He went with his family, everybody vanished. And I think he had also children, and everybody vanished. So he was working in the Jewish community. It was very small, right? 700 people. He was operating the canteen, the cafeteria. He would make toast for kids. All the Jewish kids, generations, grew up calling him Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam.
And your parents, as you think of their memory, what would they think of what you're doing now, both professionally and sharing your story personally?
Oh, I'm sure they are very proud up there about their son, and I'm sure that they feel special that their story was not forgotten.
Dr. Bourla, we too are filled with pride and gratitude. And thank you very much. This has been a privilege to get to speak to you, and we really appreciate you spending this time with us.
Thank you very much for the interest.
This concludes our program. Thank you all for joining us today and for your support of the museum's mission. We are thrilled to announce that for your family and friends who are unable to join today's program, there will be encore presentations this evening at 5 o'clock Central Time and again at 8 o'clock p.m.
If you have not made your annual gift to the museum, please give now, and please give as generously as you can. Thank you again for your support.